Sometimes there's so much beauty in the world I feel like I can't take it. Such as when a coalition of people who look like this on the Reddit forum WallStreetBets brought the US financial system to its knees. Specifically, they took a random failing company, GameStop, artificially made it one of the most valuable companies on earth, and utterly screwed over a bunch of guys who look like this. But what is short selling? What is a short squeeze? And why is a random Reddit forum being hailed as the greatest financial geniuses of our time? Buckle up for the most easy to understand explanation of Gamestonk on the entire internet. First of all, what is short selling? The normal way to use the stock market is to buy pieces of companies, and then if that company becomes more valuable, your piece becomes more valuable. For example, imagine that your friend Corey has a broken down Pontiac Fiero that he buys for $100. You decide to buy 50% of this Fiero for $50. But then Corey buys the Fiero some tires, clears the rat's nest out of the engine bay, and installs some pretty sweet fuzzy dice over the rearview mirror, thus raising the value of the Fiero to $500. As the 50% owner of this Fiero, your share is now worth $250, a rise of 400%. Very good investing. As far as I know, there is no official share market for old Fieros, but this is essentially what's being done on a daily basis with most of the world's largest companies. If you buy one share of Microsoft for $230 US, you own 0.000000013% of the company. But there's also a way to make money from a stock that is losing value. This is called short selling. Now, let's illustrate this phenomenon using a commodity everybody can relate to: a Vera Lynn cassette tape. Here's how you short sell a Vera Lynn cassette tape. Say I think that this tape is going to lose value over the next month. So I go to my local cassette store and make a deal with them. I'm going to borrow one of your Vera Lynn tapes and pay it back in 1 month. Then I take my borrowed tape and I sell it for $5. 1 month later, the cassette store wants their tape back, but what's this? The value of Vera Lynn cassette tapes has just dropped to $2. So I buy a tape for $2, pay it back to the store, and I'm up $3. Short selling is riskier than regular stock trading because there's no limit to how much money you can lose. Let's go back to your $50 Fiero investment I mentioned earlier. If Corey huffs too much glue and crashes the Fiero into a ravine, all you're going to lose is $50. But in the case of the Vera Lynn tape, what if something happens that utterly drives the value of that tape into the stratosphere? Maybe scientists discovered that the sweet melodious tones of Ms. Lynn are a guaranteed curative for heart disease, and the cost of that tape goes to $1 million overnight. That's a tough break for you, short seller. After selling your borrowed tape for $5, you now have to pay back the cassette store with a tape that costs $1 million. Net profit to you, negative $999,995. So there we have it. Those are the basic fundamentals of short selling. And that's what had been happening to GameStop. GameStop is a store that sells video games in malls. In a world of online shopping, it's basically screwed. So GameStop, more than almost any other company in the world, had attracted legions of short sellers borrowing its stock, flipping that stock, and then assuming they could just repay their debts with cheaper GameStop stock down the road. Now, how do we manipulate the fundamentals of short selling to utterly screw over a bunch of hedge funds betting on GameStop's failure? You do that by initiating what's called a short squeeze. Let's illustrate that with another super relatable commodity: signed portraits of Bill Cosby. There is a scarce number of signed Bill Cosby portraits around the world because, of course, Bill Cosby is not really in a position to sign any more autographs. For the purposes of this example, let's say the world only has 1,000 signed Bill Cosby portraits. And given the recent emergence of Bill Cosby's moral failings, it would be reasonable to assume that these portraits are probably going to be losing value in the coming months. So, the world's collection of Bill Cosby portraits attract the attention of short sellers. Just like the Vera Lynn tapes in our earlier example, short sellers borrow a bunch of Bill Cosby portraits and sell them off, expecting that they can just repay their debts with cheaper Bill Cosby portraits down the road. But here's where we encounter something known as the float. Not every Bill Cosby portrait is for sale. Some of them are in museums, some were buried with Hugh Hefner probably, others are in evidence folders. I'm sure Camille Cosby has a few in her safe deposit box. So let's say that of the world's 1,000 Bill Cosby portraits, only 300 are for sale. Here's where the short squeeze comes in. If you and a bunch of your buddies can find a way to buy every single one of those 300 portraits, that's going to be quite a problem for all the short sellers out there who are on the hook for Bill Cosby portraits but can't seem to buy any. And what happens when there is a bunch of people who desperately want to buy something and there isn't any of that thing to buy? It gets really, really expensive. You've got your short sellers over here who borrowed and flipped a bunch of Bill Cosby portraits and now need to buy back a bunch of Bill Cosby portraits to pay off their debts. And over here, you've got you and your Reddit buddies who have conspired to buy up as many Bill Cosby portraits as they possibly can. Not a Bill Cosby portrait for sale in the entire world. So the short sellers have to start raising the price. Hey Camille, would you sell us your Bill Cosby portrait for $10,000, $50,000, $100,000? Hey Hefner family, would you dig up Hugh and get his Bill Cosby portrait for us if we paid you $500,000? And that's what happened with GameStop. A bunch of short sellers borrowed shares of GameStop when they were selling for $18, assuming that when they paid them back, the shares would be worth $15, and they'd make $3. Instead, a bunch of guys on Reddit bought absolutely every share of GameStop they possibly could, and when the short sellers tried to buy back shares to repay their debts, the available number of shares for sale was so low that a stock that had once sold for $18 was now $325. Naturally, once it emerged what Reddit was doing, this led short sellers to absolutely panic and rush to buy up GameStop shares as fast as possible to cover their own short positions. This rush, in turn, just made everything worse. You had basically no GameStop shares for sale, and you had a bunch of panicked Wall Street investors all tripping over each other to buy it before they lost even more money. You may have heard this term in relation to the GameStop short squeeze: stonk. That's a term invented by Redditors to make fun of the institutional investors they absolutely screwed over. The implication being, you guys are so easily bested at your own game that you probably can't even pronounce stock correctly. So there you have it. And we probably haven't heard the last of the short squeeze. There are an awful lot of shorted companies out there, and with thousands upon thousands of Redditors salivating at their next chance for a GameStop, you're going to be seeing a lot of failing companies with stock prices suddenly rising into the stratosphere.